Morné, you're very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. Really delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation and looking forward to having some fun with you over the next hour or so.
Yeah, likewise. We've repaired the damage caused by our respective nations. Ireland beat you in the early stages of the World Cup campaign, and you went on to win it. So I'm not feeling sore about that at all.
Yeah, no, we had a brief conversation about that. It was quite the World Cup in the end. Obviously, I'm delighted that South Africa won, but I think I had very less gray hair when the tournament started than over, say, the last 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, winning games by 1 point, I think they should issue you with a defibrillator if you want to be a Springbok supporter, because it was some tense times there, definitely some tense times.
Yeah, that resonates. No, congratulations, well done. Look, we've been chatting off the air. You know, our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So, Morné, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
So it's a great question. The first thing that popped into my head when you asked me the question was, as entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs, senior leaders, I often feel like we can make money doing anything. You can get paid in a number of different ways. You could take a high-paying job somewhere else, but we choose this crazy entrepreneurial route. I think Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, said it best. Being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and assembling the plane on the way down. When I think about, why I got back into entrepreneurship and I started Emerse now 6.5 years ago, there was a purpose that was ringing in the back of my mind. I had chosen early in my career to go into sales. And what I found in my 25 years is that salespeople often get a bad rep. We think about PPI and, it's double glazing and secondhand cars. And people feel like salespeople will trick them into buying something. I work with hundreds of companies now from all over the world. And very often we'll get hired by a company to help them with developing their sales function. And the very first thing that I'm told when I walk in is, Morné, just by the way, before we get started, I just want you to know, we're not salespeople. And then I think to myself, well, hold on, am I in the right room? Did I come to the wrong address? And of course, what they're actually saying is, we feel like sales is kind of like a necessary evil. It's a dirty word. And I said, well, what are you then? Well, we're consultants, we're analysts, we're business development consultants. And I go, okay, great. Whatever title you want to give yourself, I'm happy with that. But let me ask you a question. What kind of companies have unhappy customers? And the answer is bankrupt ones. So whatever title you want to put on what you do, if you're in the business of generating revenue, you're in sales. Now, to my purpose, when I was thinking about what I wanted Emerse to be, I really felt called to bring excellence to the profession and the function of sales. And that's been my battle cry for the last 6.5 years. That's really how I've attracted my now team, my special forces team, as I call them. And this is how we've attracted clients. Because I think the reason we struggle with sales, the reason we struggle to attract A players, the reason we struggle to grow our sales repeatably and scalably is because we fail to insert excellence at every level. I was doing a talk yesterday to a group of CEOs in Canada, and we were talking about how to scout, how to recruit salespeople. And one of the things I said to them was, I want you guys to bring a prospecting mindset to the discipline of recruitment. And I taught them a process of how to go out and build a virtual bench, build a list, how to create a courting process, how to look outside of their industry. I taught them how to use multiple different ways to build a candidate pool, how to inject data and analytics into the process of selection. And when I described this whole process to them, one of the CEOs kind of turned to me on the Zoom call and said, this feels a lot like what I do when I prospect for customers. And I said, exactly. But because we haven't brought excellence to that one part of building a sales team, in this example, recruitment, we're scared to grow our sales team because statistically, the success rate is so low. So my purpose is to free entrepreneurs from the sales seat that they've been trapped in. I don't want you to be the owner and the best salesperson. I don't want you to be the entrepreneur and the de facto sales manager. I want to free you from that sales seat. And the way that we do that is by giving you confidence that you can use a sales team to grow your business. But in order to do that, you have to inject excellence at every single stage of building that team. And that's been my purpose, and it continues to be. And as you can see, I'm pretty animated and excited about it.
Yeah, that resonates so, so strongly, and I love that. Bring excellence to the profession and function of sales. And I'll tell you why I love it so much. The previous business, which I was the CEO of, we scaled that from 3 million, 15 people to almost 100 million revenues, 700 people across 6 continents, and one of the pervading challenges within the business was to actually recruit great salespeople into the business. And I recall kind of reaching a wall with this and turning to our head of talent at the time and saying, let's go out and recruit chartered sales professionals, because at that time we had chartered accountants in the business, chartered marketeers, chartered procurement people, chartered directors. And I was a big proponent of championing and cheerleading our people so that they could become the best that they could be within their chosen profession and support them within their training and development. As it turns out, there is no such thing as a chartered sales professional. So we decided to actually create our own sales business development academy and create our own training and learning academy and our own qualification that underpinned their learning and what they were going to achieve, but also was aligned to what we needed. So I love what you're doing here. I'm not sure if you're aware that there's no such thing as a chartered sales professional, which is pretty sad. So I'm going to kick off, because what I'd love to do today is a mini masterclass on how we develop lead pipelines, how we close effectively, how we nurture strong relationships. But you've raised an important point here in terms of recruiting people and or developing people internally. So practically, how do we remove the bias of the burden of kind of winning business from the founder to a team? Can you step us through that? You've teased me with what you shared with one of your clients. So can you step us through that, Morné?
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of what we do, a lot of what Emerse does as a business is create what I would call, the brass ring of sales for an entrepreneur. And that is, what does every entrepreneur really want? They want a repeatable, scalable selling system. Repeatable, scalable selling system. And what that means is I want to be able to have some predictability to what's going to happen to my investment. Think about this. If you're an entrepreneur and you had a repeatable, scalable selling system, and you could say, well, there's some predictability that if I spend, £5, €5, $5 over here, then there's a predictability to how I turn that into 50. Think about the confidence that you would have in your decision-making if you knew that there was predictability and scalability, repeatability to what it is that I was doing, and how you could actually then lean into the investment in your business. I often say to people, if I could show you a way of how you could have a 91% success predictability in building your team, what would you say? And often the response that I get is, well, how many salespeople can I have? Like, how many can you get me, and how fast can you bring them to me?
Absolutely.
But of course, we touched on this issue of bringing salespeople in. 50% of whether they're successful is not if you could find good ones. There's art and science to that for sure. But 50% is, what do you do with them when you get them? And that's where this kind of repeatability comes in. That's where we now have to look at how to remove the sales leader from that sales seat. It's a very big topic. So I'll give you the soundbite masterclass version of it.
Brilliant.
The first thing that we need to do is, if you want me to set you free as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, then I've got to extract from you what makes you unique, different, and special. One of the top 3 things that entrepreneurs will say to me, Morné, what I struggle with is I can't get my salespeople to sell like me. Of course you can't. They're not you. They don't have your credibility, your authority, your gravitas. But most importantly, they don't have your connection to your vision, to your purpose, to your mission. So I have to extract from you all of the things that you do through muscle memory. I've got to capture that and create a sales playbook. So I've got to, capture the best practices by stages in the sales process and all of that, all that entails. But if I build you what is, ostensibly a top tier sales playbook, that's not going to get the job done. Because if I stole the playbook from whatever your favorite sports team is, or the sports team that won whatever sport you follow, let's say the South African rugby team just won the Rugby World Cup. If I take their playbook and I gave it to another team, I don't want to mention a name, fear of insulting anyone, but I gave it to a team who didn't win. Will that team win? No, of course not. Because the playbook is not the thing. It's the coaching culture that you build around it. It's whether you have the right players to execute that playbook. It's whether you have role practice. So the first thing that we need to do is I need to capture all of the best practices at every stage of your sales process. And then I've got to figure out how to codify and coach it. And what that means is I've got to create a culture where we do role practice. We do training. We do joint field sales calls. I've got to create a sales culture where your salespeople are hungry to learn. They're coachable. They do come to role practice. They do complete the CRM. They do lessons learned. And that's got a lot to do with who I select, but also how I treat them once they get there. The second part of why salespeople are or are not successful is what do I do with them when I get there? I don't know what your listeners and your viewers might think about McDonald's. They're not on trial, but what McDonald's have taught us is this. If you want to truly scale, then your business model cannot be, I need extraordinary people to paper over the cracks of my ordinary processes. You cannot rely on extraordinary people because someone will always outspend you for the top talent. And people that join for money, leave for money. What I need instead are extraordinary systems and processes, an extraordinary playbook, an extraordinary coaching culture, so that even ordinary people can do it. Now, I'm not telling your listeners and your viewers to go and hire ordinary salespeople, but what I am saying is, if I've got an extraordinary coaching culture, playbook, systems, processes, then I can take salespeople from outside of my industry even. And if they have the right mindset and the right energy, I can spin them up and I can turn them into top performers. That's how you take off the golden handcuffs.
Oh, that resonates so strongly. It's a strong nod to the fifth principle of our 10 principle ScaleX framework, which is process, and also the 10th principle, the keystone principle, which is positive growth culture. So essentially what we're saying here, what I'm hearing is really, spend time with the founder who is typically biased towards business development and winning the business, and really create that playbook, and enshrined, wrapped around that is a culture that is all about learning and development and coaching. So ultimately we can give the sales code to others, and ultimately train them and develop them in that in that playbook. What if the founder said, well, I've got this unique ability, you mentioned the gravitas, the kudos, the kind of the years, the decades often in the industry, what would you say to those who kind of reject that and say, well, look, people want to buy from me. This is the challenge. I don't feel what we can do can be codified. Have you seen a situation where it can't be?
Have I seen a situation where it can't be? I think what I would say is more often what I've seen is a founder, owner, manager, entrepreneur that has a limiting belief that it can't be.
Yeah.
I talk about the 4-minute mile. We know Roger Bannister, the 4-minute mile, 1954, Roger Bannister runs 3:59.6. Up until 1954, everybody biologists, psychologists, coaches, everybody said the human body cannot run that fast for that long. It cannot be done. It would be the equivalent today of saying, well, Usain Bolt ran the 100 meters in 9.53. That's like saying he's going to run it in sub 8 seconds. It just can't be done. But in 1954, Roger Bannister runs 359.6. And within 46 days, one more person does it. Within 12 months, 24 more people do it. And today, over 1,700 people have done it. Often when I speak to CEOs and businesses, I say to them, what's the 4-minute mile in your business? Because if you, as the owner, the entrepreneur, believes that you cannot teach people to sell like you, or maybe you have a belief that my industry is different, my industry is special, my industry is regulated. Morné, in my industry, you have to be an expert in the product or the service or the industry. In my industry, you have to have a book of contacts. In my industry, you have to have 20 years worth of experience. If that's your 4-minute mile, then that's your 4-minute mile. And until somebody breaks through that, you're never going to be free of that sales seat. But somebody's got to show them that the 4-minute mile can be broken. And then all of a sudden, it becomes, over time, self-evident that it can be done. What I often say to clients that I speak with is, the reason you have that limiting belief, the reason you can't hire from outside of your industry or you can't replicate results, is because your playbook is non-existent or it sucks. And because it's non-existent, you don't have a coaching culture. That's why you can't replicate and scale what you do. But it starts with you letting go of that limiting belief.
Yeah, again, strong nod to the very first principle of our 10 principle ScaleX framework, which is psyche. And we certainly assert that 80% of scaling success rests in the mindset of the founder, the leader of the organization. So I love that analogy in terms of breaking through the 4-minute mile. And so let's just get into that a little bit further. I want to come back to the playbook and kind of get into some of the tactics, some of the things that the playbook will contain. Just staying on the recruitment theme for a moment. Let's say we have the playbook in place. If you're supporting CEOs with their recruitment of A players, what are you typically looking for in sales professionals, or those who can be sales professionals?
Well, the first thing I think that we look for is whether the company that's looking to bring salespeople in actually have a clear understanding of what kind of salesperson they're trying to hire. I get a call a week from someone saying, hey, Morné, I saw something of yours online, or I heard you speak, or whatever the case might be. And I heard you talk about these A player salespeople. And I'm going to assume for the moment that our viewers and listeners know what an A player is. That's obviously a top grading thing. A player, simply put, somebody who's highly aligned to our core values. So they love the company, love the product, they bleed our corporate colors, and they're very good at what they do. So people will call me up and say, Morné, I want one of those A players that you talk about. And I said, sure. What kind of a salesperson are you looking for? Well, one of those that they can build a list, and then they can prospect the list and find the really good opportunities. And then they can do the discovery, and then they can quote them, and then they can close the deal, and then they can hand it over to my production or engineering team, make sure that it gets delivered well, make sure that we get paid on time, of course. They need to make sure that we get a testimonial and a referral from that customer, and then account manage that account as long as they're going to stay with us. And I kind of laugh and I say, okay, well, we started this conversation by you saying that you wanted one salesperson, but you've just described to me 4 different salespeople. Which one of the 4 are we trying to hire? No, I want one person to do all of that. Well, firstly, if you're going to ask, what is the scorecard of a great salesperson? Well, let's get clear on what it is that you're trying to hire, because a door opener is different to a closer. A closer is different to an account manager. An account manager is different to a farmer. A farmer might be different to a customer success or a new logo. The first thing that we need to do is get really clear on what is the role that they're going to play in our sales process, because that's going to determine the personality preference, the communication style, the makeup. If I want to hire a door opener or a hunter, what I'm looking for is actually somebody that jumps out of bed in the morning and wants to chew raw meat off the bone. But if I'm looking for a great account manager or a farmer, I might be looking for someone who's better at consultative selling and building relationships, building trust, building rapport, that understands that it's more about the customer than it is about the transaction. So I need to get clear with what I'm looking for because, using the sporting analogy again, sumo wrestlers in Japan are considered world-class athletes. They deities in that culture. And when I lived in London for 20 years, I would go to Wimbledon on occasion and I would see some of the best tennis players in the world running around Wimbledon doing things that, defies logic. So sumo wrestlers are world-class athletes and tennis players are world-class athletes. But how many sumo wrestlers do you see running around Wimbledon? Not many. I get companies calling me all the time saying, Morné, I have an amazing inside sales team. I've built these people over years. They're really great at satisfying our customers' needs, and they're good at increasing share of wallet and extending customer lifetime value. And I'm really happy with this team. Well, that's great. How can I help? I need you to help me teach my inside sales team how to prospect. No, I'm not going to do that because it won't work.
Yeah.
You can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
So
it's not going to happen. So there are lots of profiles that we can build for different roles, but you have to get clear on what it is that you're trying to hire first and foremost.
Yeah, the challenge of course, in an SME environment, Morné, is that we don't have the budget. I'm doing the sales today. I can't. This isn't scalable. How do we bring somebody in the business who can do all of this tomorrow? We don't have the budget at this stage for 4 different roles. What can we do? Let's jump into the playbook a little bit. Here in terms of trying to understand what are the various components of successful selling in terms of building that pipeline, nurturing those leads, closing those leads, and kind of and then building relationships beyond there. How do you kind of map those, what we need, which is all of those things you've described in an SME environment? We need that in one person, or would you contend that, well, no, 3 or 4 of those bits you're going to have to systemize them and bring the person in who can actually close them? If you've got a leads funnel or a marketing department that's working well for you, well, then really what you need is somebody who's going to take those and close them. So can you kind of speak to that in the context of an SME, and then we'll kind of get into some of the tactics in terms of building pipeline, closing and nurturing then?
Sure. I think what I'd love to do is, because you touched on something there just at the end, and said, within the context of an SME, we don't have the budget to hire those 3 or 4 roles. That's something that we hear a lot. And my first thought is that your 4-minute mile?
Yeah.
Is that the limiting belief that's holding you back? Because that I have a close partnership and relationship with Jack Daly. And what Jack will often say to that is, how big is your vision? Because there's no judgment from me. If you want to build a lifestyle business that's got 1 or 2 salespeople, and that business affords you the lifestyle that you want, time with your family, time to travel, time to do whatever. Time is the one thing, right? That's the non-renewable needs, the non-renewable resource. I can make more money. I can't make more time. So if you're building a lifestyle business with 1 or 2 salespeople, and that gives you the lifestyle you want, not only am I not judging you, I encourage that. You probably sleep better than most. But if your vision is that you want that scalable, repeatable selling system, if your vision is that you want to grow your business by growing your sales team, well, then maybe the first limiting belief that you need to let go is, I can't afford to hire 2, 3, 4, 5 salespeople. Because I think what I often see is, if we come at it from that scarcity, from that limiting mindset, that's when I try and find those unicorn salespeople that can do everything. And at best, if I can find them, and that's a big if, all I'm doing is kicking the can down the road. Because at some point, those people, that 1, 2 salespeople that do everything, they're going to become the friction that stops me from getting what I want, which is repeatability and scalability. Because now I have two salespeople who are making me money that do a little bit of everything. And I realize that I can't replicate that. That's not a replicable thing. Now I'm trying to hire roles around them, but these people that help me be successful, they are now countercultural. And now I've got to unpick something that I've done out of necessity to try and build what I actually really, really want. So I would just ask, is that the 4-minute mile that you need to get over before we can actually get into building what you truly want to build?
Yeah, there's a question for all of our listeners, you know, in terms of, and in the context of building your sales team, what is your 4-minute mile at the moment? And I suspect that for many, they will have a limiting belief around the fact that they're the only people who can sell, or that they do not have the budget to recruit the different skill sets that are required in terms of building out a complete sales team. Let's just get into the playbook for the moment.
I was going to say, then we can get into the next 4-minute mile, which is a whole nother topic, which is compensation plans. People will say, well, Morné, over there in America where you are now, you know, salespeople are aggressive. Salespeople will work for commission only. Here where I am in Europe or South Africa or Australia, it doesn't work like that. Here, we have to pay full board. We have to pay a full market salary. So it's not possible for me to hire these multiple roles.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, but my geography, my industry is special, is different. Maybe that's your 4-minute mile.
Well, let's just get into this for a moment. Because I get asked this a lot, you know, what, in my experience, how do I best structure the overall compensation for salespeople such that they're motivated and aligned to the vision, without actually upsetting the rest of the organization, and you know, and ensuring that actually people are motivated consistently across the year. You know, sometimes in quarterly bonus plans or commission plans, we see spikes at the end of each quarter in terms of performance, different things. In your experience, have you seen an optimum compensation plan in terms of the mix between kind of fixed compensation by virtue of their basic salary plus commission, other benefits? What's your view on that, Morné?
Wouldn't it be lovely if I had a soundbite answer for that? I'd be doing this call from my yacht or my satellite phone. Let me do my best to give you a kind of a short answer to that, but it's still substantive enough that it'll be valuable for your listeners. Let's talk about just salespeople for the moment. And then, as I said earlier, let's be specific about what kind of salespeople we're talking about. So let's assume for the moment that the most valuable salesperson you need in your business right now is somebody that can generate new business. I'm not saying that's the case for you, but I find that that's on aggregate what people are most looking for. We have a methodology that my company Emerse uses when we help our clients build out compensation plans. And wherever, and we operate in 7 different countries now on 3 different continents. So we have a pretty good understanding of the cultural differences between Europe and Africa and America and Canada even. And everybody has a limiting belief that they can't do a compensation structure that's biased towards the commission, because they believe that if you don't pay good money, you won't get good salespeople. The approach that we take is very similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I find that weirdly, whatever you studied at college, everybody knows what Maslow's hierarchy of needs is, where at the bottom of the pyramid, you have, you know, basic food and shelter. And then it goes up the pyramid, and at the top, you have self-actualization. Well, we use that same kind of philosophy when we build compensation plans. At the bottom of the pyramid is, what are some of the basic expenses that I need to cover for you? Your car, your mobile phone. What are some of the basic benefits you need? Do you need healthcare? Do you need a pension contribution? Do you need a gym membership? And then we kind of build it up from there. But when it comes to the all-important salary, the approach that we take, very high level, is I want to be able to give my salespeople 3 options. And I want to use this as part of my recruitment process, where I want to see how do they self-select. Now, let's use the example of a new salesperson. And I don't know the numbers obviously in anybody's company. We're going to have wildly different companies on this call. So let me just use general numbers. You could say to a salesperson, you know, you want to come work for me? Option number 1, we're going to guarantee you 100,000 euros, pounds, dollars, whatever it might be, 100,000 guaranteed salary, plus a 5% commission on what you sell. your on-target earnings, if everything goes according to plan, is going to be 175,000. Option number 2, instead of guaranteeing you 100,000, I'm going to guarantee you 60,000. But I'm going to give you a 10% commission, and your on-target earnings instead of 175 is going to be 300. Option number 3, I guarantee you no salary, 0. You are commission only. But instead of a 5 or a 10% commission, you're on 25% commission. And your on-target earnings is as much as 750,000. Which one of these 3 options do you want to go for? 100 plus 5, maxing out at 175, 75 plus 10, maxing out at 300, or 0, maxing out at 750. And what I want to see during that process is I want to see a little bit of sweat on their brow while they're figuring out where they are. And what we'll often find is they'll go for the second option, the middle tier. But if they are a little bit ambitious, they'll say, well, if I go for number 2, you know, the 60,000 plus 10% where I can make as much as 300. If I then get into this job for 6 months and I can see that you as a company will really support me with my leads, you'll really deliver well so that I can get repeat business. Is there an opportunity for me to migrate to option 3 where I will give up the guaranteed salary and I will take the uncapped 25% commission? That conversation I will have with you. But if I'm looking for a hunter, if I'm looking for an A player, remember A players can make money anywhere. If you're an A player and you believe that you're good at what you do, if you pick option 1, you've selected yourself out of my company. Doesn't mean that you're a bad person. You can probably be very valuable someplace else, but you're a place in your life and you have the limiting beliefs, which means for this role, this hunting role, you're probably not the right fit for me. So sometimes the compensation self-selection needs to be part of the recruitment. Then it's not you trying to convince a salesperson that they should be more compensated, more incentive-based than salary. Sometimes you weave it into the way that you select, and the right salespeople will put their hands up and say, I back myself. If you're as good as you say you are, I'll come work for you and we'll make some money together.
Yeah, I love that question. In all my years in business, I've never heard the compensation question considered like that, in terms of actually posing that question to potential salespeople and let them self-select. And then during that self-selection process, you're going to learn a huge amount about them. I love that. So let's just kind of come back to the playbook. So we've determined what roles we actually need. We've created a scorecard which determines success in those respective roles. We've set compensation levels mutually aligned to our vision. And we're now about to hand this salesperson the playbook, which codifies the way we do things in this business to increase the probability of closing. What are some of the kind of the fundamental principles that we will find within everyone's playbook, regardless of the company or the industry or the region? What should people be, if people are coming to this for the first time, I suspect a lot of people listening will not have a playbook. For them to begin this process, over the next the number of days, weeks, months, whatever, what should be in there in terms of the fundamentals of a solid playbook?
I think in my experience, the actual statistic of how many people have a playbook is 2 out of 100.
Right, there we go.
I speak to, dozens, if not hundreds of companies every single month. And if I have audiences and I say, put your hand up if you have a playbook that you can send me in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's about 2 out of 100. So yeah. I say that by way of context so that people don't think, my goodness, I should have this thing. You should, But if you don't have it, fear not. That's not uncommon. The question is, what will you do with that self-awareness after today?
Yeah, and
So to answer your
interestingly, actually,
question,
on that stat, Morné, interestingly, in the UK alone, less than 1% of companies are
wow.
achieving scale. So, and I suspect those 1% have sales playbooks, so similarly aligned.
Absolutely. So to your question about, what should be in a playbook, I mean, a playbook can be as wide and as deep as you want it to be. But what I would say, a good starting point is what we would call a quick start playbook. So the first thing that we help our clients build is a quick start playbook is really designed on answering the fundamental questions that a new salesperson in your business would have. So very simply, we start with, first and foremost, who are your high value targets? Who are the high value prospects that you should be going after? And by high value, I don't just mean how much money they're going to spend, although that is often a big consideration. I'm talking about who are the prospects that have a compelling reason to buy from you. And I want to be able to identify not only who they are, but where do I find them? If I'm a new salesperson into your business and you hire me, I'm going to be asking you on day one, so who do you want me to sell to and where do I find them? If I have a list of 10,000 companies, how do I find the 100 companies that have a compelling reason to buy from me? Now, why would they have a compelling reason to buy from you? Well, the second thing that I want to know, well, the third thing really that I want to know is, I want to know what are the problems that I'm solving? What are what we call their high value needs? What are the things that they will pay for in any economy? Everybody cares about price. Everybody cares about the quality of the product or service. Everybody cares about how quickly it can get delivered. It's not even that I'm talking about. What are the things that really matter to that prospect? An example is I have a client in London, just outside of London, and they manufacture outdoor furniture for housing developments and schemes like that. And we found that they sell through landscape architects very often. Landscape architects will recommend them to the housing developers or the main contractors. And when we did this exercise is to figure out, well, what are the high value needs? I was asking the salespeople and they said, well, they care about the technical specification and they care about the data and this and that. I said, well, what else? What else? What else? And then we found out that landscape architects in this particular industry are often on site all day. And then they go home at night and they're doing all of their notes and their specifications between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. And what happens is between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m., nobody from my client is at the office to answer any queries that they might have. And they've tried putting all the CAD blocks on an extranet and giving people access. And they tried doing double shifts and all that kind of stuff, but it never really worked. So eventually we said, well, if it's a high value need for them to have access to you between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., how about we hire somebody in Australia who's on a 12-hour time difference? How about we get somebody who just wants to, a mom that wants to work half days, and we just get them to be available from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. every morning. So we hired somebody over there. We made them available. We made it a non-geographic number to call. And all of a sudden, sales went up over 30% in 6 months. You've got to find the high value needs, the things that people will actually pay for. Once you've done that, now we want to start distilling this into what are the promises I'm making to solve these needs? What is my value proposition? What is my unique selling proposition? But more importantly, what are the questions I can ask to differentiate myself? I'll get into, we can get into differentiation maybe as a separate topic, because I don't believe that people will buy from you because you can prove that you're good value, you have a good price, you're experienced, you're knowledgeable. People don't buy from you for those reasons. Why? Because your closest competitor is saying all the exact same things. But I want to know, once I know who my target is, where I can find them, what problems am I solving, what promises do I need to make, how do I distill that into sales messaging? How do I distill that into my value proposition, unique selling proposition, and ultimately an elevator pitch, which cuts through the noise? Then I want to move on and I want to know, what is the competitive landscape that I'm selling in? Because we're not the only game in town. Who am I selling against and why does that matter? Well, it matters because I tell my clients, you're not pitching your prospects in a vacuum. They are hearing from other salespeople. And you should probably know what those salespeople are saying so that you can differentiate yourself and navigate your way through that competitive landscape. You should probably know what your routes to market are. What is all the different ways that I'm going to reach my client? That should be in your playbook. And you should understand the customer journey. So many salespeople are sitting in front of prospects, asking them to make a buying decision, the scope and complexity of which they have never had to do in their own lives. You've never spent the amount of money that you're asking that person to spend. But we teach our salespeople, oh, this is your value proposition. And then what do? They show up and throw up. Let me tell you, let me tell you, let me tell you, let me tell you. You should buy from me because we're the best product at the best service. We're really knowledgeable. We've been in business 50 years, blah, 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 blah. And the prospect will only sign the order to get rid of you. If we could just teach the salespeople what the buying process is, the actual psychology of that prospect, then we can teach them how to ask better quality questions. And then finally, in that quick start playbook, I want to at least have one of my sales processes mapped out. How do we lead gen? How do we qualify our prospects? How do we discover? How do we quote? How do we pitch? How do we close? How do we follow up? Because now, just with that little quick start playbook, if you bring me one of those A-player salespeople, I can grab you and say, hey, Morné, we're really happy to have you here as a salesperson. By the way, part of your onboarding is, this is who I want you to sell to. Here are the ways that you can find them, the problems that you're going to solve, the objections you're going to get, the promises you're going to make, the elevator pitch, who you're selling against, the buying psychology of your prospect. Oh, and here's a mapped out sales process. And all I need you to do is follow the bouncing ball with enthusiasm and consistency. If you stop there, you don't even have to build an all singing, all dancing playbook. If you stop there, think how much faster your salespeople will be net profitable and how much more predictability you will have in your scale.
Yeah.
But we don't have that.
That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The quick start playbook. I've never heard the term show up and throw up, but can relate to that. The kind of the brochure sales, the brochure sales salesperson, where they arrive at reception with the brochures underhand and kind of leave them at reception, or are so keen to, when they get in front of the customer, to talk about the features of their product, as opposed to really trying to get under the skin of the customer's problems, the pains that they're actually trying to solve. That's wonderful. The quick start playbook. I want to just touch on something that you mentioned right at the outset. We talked about processes and systems. Mm-hmm. Putting the right processes and systems in place, getting the right people into the business, giving them the playbook. Let's come to the role of the leadership in the context of coaching and nurturing and developing their sales teams. Can you speak to that? What role should management and leadership take here in terms of actually supporting their sales team to become world class?
Sure. It's a great question. Big topic. You know my partner, Jack, very well, and you've heard Jack, no doubt, speak about the 3 sins of sales management. So first and foremost, the reason we struggle often to build world-class sales teams is because we fail to recognize that sales management is a dedicated full-time job, unquestionably. If anybody wants to challenge me on that, I'm happy to go toe to toe. I'm happy to give you an hour by hour breakdown over a course of a month to show you what a real sales manager should be doing. But we commit these 3 sins of sales management, where classically, number 1, the CEO entrepreneur is also the de facto sales manager, and then doesn't have the bandwidth to do some of the things that we've talked about today. They don't have the bandwidth to always be recruiting. They don't have the bandwidth to build a playbook. They don't have the bandwidth to do role practice or coaching or mentoring or holding people accountable. Or we take our best salesperson and we promote them to sales management, which is always a mistake, well, almost always, because you lose your best salesperson and you gain an average sales manager. Or we make it even worse and we take our best salesperson, promote them to sales manager, and then we insist that they keep selling because, Morné, my team is small. We can't afford for the sales manager not to sell. Of course, they're going to have to keep selling, but we don't think about the fact that they're constantly in conflict, because when they're selling, they're not building your team in quantity and quality. And when they're actually doing some of the sales management stuff, they're not selling. And because our compensation plans haven't been, organized properly, they make more money selling than they do managing. So what do? We gravitate towards the thing that makes us the most money and that we're good at. So first and foremost, I plead with your listeners and your viewers to recognize that sales management is one of the most difficult, but one of the most crucial roles that you'll ever have to bring into your business if you're going to scale using a sales team. And it is a dedicated role. But Morné, I've only got 1 or 2 salespeople. I get it. But then I go back to my original question. How big is your vision? Because if your vision requires 5 or more salespeople, you need a dedicated sales manager, not when you have 5 to get you to 5. A sales manager has 2 jobs and 2 jobs only. Build the sales team in quantity and quality. The end. A sales manager is not there to sell. They cannot carry a bag and build your team in quantity and quality. And I know that are people that are listening to me right now and saying, yeah, but you don't understand. I don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
I promise you, you're going to pay more down the line in the hiring mistakes that you're going to make, in the performance that you're not going to get from your team, in the not building of a quality playbook, in the not getting a repeatable, scalable selling system. You're going to pay many, many, many multiples more cost by not putting a dedicated sales manager or leader into your business early, much, much earlier than you think. Jack and I both say sports teams are run better than most businesses. And part of the reason for that is because they prepare, they practice, they keep score, they have a dedicated coach, and they have a playbook. You don't have the other 4 unless you have a dedicated sales manager or leader. Because remember what I said, even if you somehow, with my help or on your own, miraculously build a top-tier sales playbook, that's not the thing. The thing is the role practice, the joint field sales calls, the motivation, the accountability, the performance coaching, the pipeline management, the touch system for follow-ups. Those things don't get done at an elite level unless you have a very effective sales manager. And then when you go a tier up to sales leadership, well, even if you don't call yourself the sales leader, if you're just the president or the CEO of the MD of the company, you still have a role to play in sales. And your role is you have to set the sales culture. Sales culture by design. Because if your sales culture is not by design, it's by default. And if it's by default, everything in sales is more difficult. Sales culture is an accelerator of everything that you do well, or a detractor if it's broken. The way that I describe it is, imagine being in a closed room and all the people in the room are in sales and every single one has got COVID. If I somehow manage to get a healthy salesperson to walk into that closed room, what happens? They get sick. The healthy person doesn't make the sick people healthy. The sick people make the healthy person sick. If you walk a healthy salesperson into a toxic sales culture, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at playbooks, training, coaching, mentoring, your sales culture will pull them down. So as a leader, your job is a winning sales culture. As a manager, your job is building the team in quantity and quality. And only then will you have a repeatable, scalable selling system.
So profound, Morné. A couple of things on that. Just a couple of practical points. At what scale or at what size should we be contemplating bringing a sales manager in? Is it 2 people, 3 people, 4 people in our sales team? And at that stage, we need management or dedicated management that's beyond the founder, CEO. What's your view on that?
My view is pretty provocative. And my view is it's not about at how many salespeople, it's at what point did you decide that you were going to use a sales team to scale your business. I was on the phone early this morning here in Miami, speaking to a lady that owns it's a company that does printing and promotional items here on the East Coast. She is the owner of the company. She's the top salesperson and her daughter is the second salesperson. My advice to her this morning was the very first thing we're going to do for you is hire a sales manager. And she looked at me on the Zoom call and went, hold on, I think you're confused, or you remember what we said about my size of my company? I said, no, I remember. But you told me that over the next 3 years, you want to 8x your business. I'm telling you that even though you have one salesperson, you're not the person to build that sales team. You're not the person to lead that sales team. And that's not an indictment on her ability. She admitted to me that that's not in her character. That's not what her superpower is. So I said, well, we're going to do for you, if you're committed to this vision, we're going to bring a sales manager in now. And my team will teach them how to do recruitment like us. We will give them the tools and the processes. We will hold their hand, and they are going to build the team for you in quantity and quality. Because worst case scenario, at some point in that journey, you might lose that sales manager, but because you have somebody boots on the ground, you will have a playbook, you will have extraordinary systems and processes, and we can replace the sales manager. But if we did something different, I said to her, if you go and do it, you don't have the expertise, the skills, nor the time to do it. You're the CEO of the company. At best, you'll go out and hire 1 or 2 salespeople, or 3, and you'll hire them in your image. And then you're going to call me back in 18 months from now, and you're going to say, Morné, I now have 3 or 4 salespeople. Now I need you to help me find a sales manager. Now we have a different problem, because you've gone out as the CEO and you've hired a number of salespeople. And then one day you decide that you've got too many hats that you're wearing. And then you want my help to hire a sales manager. And then you come to me and say, I want you to find me a great sales manager. And I want that sales manager to professionalize my team. Does that sound familiar?
Very familiar.
And what you're actually doing is you're parachuting that sales manager in between you and the sales team. And you have a sales team over here that goes, but hold on, I used to deal directly with the CEO, and I really liked the way that he treated me, because he let me do my own thing, and we didn't have a playbook. We didn't have to do all these rules and all this role practice. This new person wants me to do all this other stuff. I don't like that. So I'm either going to go over, around, or through the sales manager, or I'm leaving the company. So all you're doing is you're convincing yourself, your 4-minute mile is, I can't afford to have a sales manager, Morné, because I don't have salespeople to manage. You haven't understood my problem correctly. Respectfully, I've understood it fine. I've just been on this journey more times than you. You know, 48 different industries, over 200 clients in the last 6 years on 7 different countries. I've been down this road before, and I've seen what's waiting for you 2 years, 3 years down the line. And I'm asking you to take an experience share. And understand that if your vision is you're going to build your company with a sales team, hire the sales manager leader now, even if there's nobody to manage. Yes, it's going to cost you a bit of money in the first year, but I promise you, the payoff in the medium to long term is going to exceed your wildest expectations.
I suspect lots of people listening are going to struggle with that one.
Yep, absolutely.
It does resonate strongly, having kind of gone from one salesperson in the south of Ireland to a team of 30 across 6 continents, and then trying to put a sales manager in place. Somewhere along that journey, everything you're saying resonates. I'm still struggling in an SME context too, so I'm going to have to sit with that one for a little bit. But logically, I get exactly what you're saying. Coming to the culture, before we move into our close, in terms of recognizing toxicity, I loved your analogy. Such a strong analogy. Great salespeople, healthy people won't make sick people well. That really strikes a chord. What should leaders be looking out for within their sales team for signs of a virus looming?
Mm-hmm. So many of the things that I get calls for, that people ask, to hire my company, can you help me, get my salespeople to adopt the CRM? Can you help me? Morné, we have a playbook of sorts, but nobody seems to use it. Morné, we're struggling with accountability within the team. Morné, we have, a massive gap between our top performers and our bottom performers. And whatever we do and however much money we spend on training, that gap never seems to get any smaller. Morné, we have a really good sales team that are doing well, but every time I try and add more people to the team, I don't seem to be able to replicate what we have. The people that we have, have been with the company 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, and the only way that they're successful is they grew up in the company. How do I get new people in to be repeatable and scalable? We've all either heard or said these things. So often, those issues are a manifestation of a culture that's not by design. I haven't built the culture. I haven't designed the culture to be repeatable and scalable. And when we talk about culture, there's a number of key pillars that we work through when we look at this in companies. We look for things like, what are the opportunities for professional and personal ongoing development? So what is the coaching, the mentoring, the training programs that run in this business, and how coachable are people that are there? We can actually evaluate your team and tell you how coachable they are, because we have a saying here in Florida, sometimes the juice is not worth the squeeze. Sometimes the amount of time and money and energy that I've got to put in to get this team to perform is just not worth it, because I'm not going to get a result in my season, in this fiscal year, or maybe the next 2 or 3 years. We look for things like reward and recognition. It's not just about the money. Yes, of course, salespeople are money motivated, but oftentimes that's not the only thing. Oftentimes, people are just not extrinsically motivated. They're also intrinsically or altruistically motivated. I can tell you stories for days about salespeople where they found something meaningful to that salesperson that touched their heart. And more so than money, that turned that salesperson into a top performer. What is the reward and recognition systems within your business? What are the communication systems is the third thing. How do you communicate? What is the cadence, the rhythm, the intention, the intensity of your communication? Do you do role practice every week? Do you do lessons learned? Do you actually do accountability sessions? Do you do performance coaching? Do you speak to your team often and share success stories? I love the idea of using success stories as the fuel, the myth, the legend. So often the CEO of the company has these amazing stories about when they built the company. You know who doesn't have those stories? Your salespeople. We're wired for storytelling. If I show up and throw up with a prospect, you should buy from me because blah, 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 blah. Instead of asking great questions, and then when they say something, you go, you know what? This really reminds me of another client. Let me tell you a story of this other customer that we used to work with. We're wired for storytelling. We're wired for the vision being the battle cry. So the way that we communicate becomes part of the culture. And then empowerment is the fourth pillar. So many CEOs, business owners, VP of sales come to me and say, Morné, what I struggle with is that my sales team can't seem to think for themselves. There is a lack of mastery. There is a lack of autonomy. But when I look at their sales processes, very often, the salespeople are not empowered to make decisions. What I observe is the salesperson will go out and sit in front of a prospect, and the prospect will say, you know what, I think I'm ready to sign, but could you change the specification for me? Could we change the payment terms? Could we do something different with the timeline? And what the salesperson says is, let me go back and ask. Now, that exact same scenario, imagine that salesperson sitting in front of that prospect and their boss, the sales manager, is sitting right next to them. When that prospect says, can we change the payment terms? The sales manager will say, yes, I think we can do that. So why can't the salesperson do that without the sales manager? Because we don't trust them, because we don't have guardrails, because we don't have questions that we empower salespeople to ask. And if they get multiple yeses, they can do the deal, even if they make a mistake. So there's many facets to sales culture. Sales culture is the air that we breathe, but we don't intentionally design it that way. And as a result, we don't have repeatability. We don't have scalability.
I'm kind of a little bit shell shocked here because everything that you've said resonates so strongly. If only I had met you 20 years ago.
If only I knew what I knew now 20 years ago, my life would have been so much easier. My goodness, it took me 25 years of trial and error to figure this all out.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, there'll be lots of people who want to connect with you. We'll come to that. Just before I move into the close, Morné, is there anything Is there anything that you feel we haven't touched upon that that you want to relate to our listeners in the context of attracting the right team into the business, building that team, providing an appropriate playbook, anything in that context that you want to leave our listeners with?
So many. I mean, when you and I first spoke, you said to me, think about 3 timeless takeaways. And
Well, we'll come to that.
Oh, we're going to come to that.
We're going to
Okay.
come to
Okay.
that, but just in because that's a broader context. But
Okay.
anything specific to what we've just spoken about in the context of of those SME leaders who are really struggling with this at the moment. Maybe the burden of sales is falling on them. They're struggling to hire in great people. They've maybe heard this this concept of playbook for the very, very first time. Anything that we haven't touched upon that you feel is important before we move into the close?
I mean, to be honest, so many things, but if I had to kind of condense it into a single thought, because I'm a big advocate for, complexity is the enemy of execution.
Yeah.
And you've just said, it almost feels a little bit overwhelming. There's so much information, and what I don't want is for people to come away from this hour and say, well, I feel like that was valuable, but I don't even know where to start.
Yes. Yeah.
So as a singular thought, especially if you're struggling with this idea of repeatable, scalable sales, then I would love for business owners, entrepreneurs who are looking to scale to take it back to basics and say, right, when I prospect for new business, I sort of get how I need to do that. I know that I need to start with a list of people that I want to sell to, and I've got to kind of figure out what it is that they need. And then I've got to work out what I can say in order to get them. I want you to apply that exact same thinking to building your sales team. I want you to apply that same thinking. It seems really arbitrary when I say it, but I want you to be as resourceful about finding opportunities as you are about finding salespeople and finding ways to serve your clients. And what I mean by that is I have people saying to me things like, Morné, we've tried to build a sales team so many times, and I'm frustrated, and I don't want to do it because it's so expensive when we get it wrong. And I'll say, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. Like, tell me a little bit about how you bring salespeople in. Well, we've tried a recruiter, and we've done some LinkedIn, and we've done, Indeed.com. And how successful has that been? Oh, about 30% of the time. And when it was only successful 30% of the time, what did you do then? How did you change your approach? And they kind of look at me and go, what do you mean? I said, well, it only worked 30% of the time. So that a 70% failure rate, what did you do differently the next time? No, we tried it again. Okay, well, if what you were doing in prospecting was only effective 30% of the time, would you try something different? Yeah, of course I would. I would run out of money otherwise. Well, maybe you should apply that same thinking to everything that you do in sales. If the way that you do opening calls is only 30% effective, how would you change it? If the way that you did a discovery call was only 30% effective, how would you change it? If the way that you pitched a deal was only effective 30% of the time, how would you change it? If you worked on the basis that you've got to try things until you get a reasonable success rate, well, why wouldn't you apply that to everything that you do? Because then you can join me on my mission and we can bring excellence back to the profession of sales. Because excellence is not saying, well, it's a 30% success rate, I guess that's good enough. Excellence is saying, let me try something else. And then I'm going to encourage you, when you actually find things that work, then I beg of you to put it in your playbook. I know that some of you will say, well, Morné, you talk about playbooks as if I already have the answers and all you're going to do is capture it and help me put it down. I get that sometimes you just don't know what works. Then you should work with somebody who can, suggest some better ways to do things, but you're still going to have to test it in your business. But when it works every day, every week, then you capture that in the playbook and then you practice it, not until you get it right, but until you can't get it wrong. Because here's the big takeaway. I want you to think about this picture. I'm a very visual person. What would you rather? Would you rather brush your teeth for 24 hours nonstop for one day? Or would you rather brush it for 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes in the evening for a year? Because the time commitment is almost exactly the same. Which one of those two will give you a better result after 12 months?
Oh, sage advice, Morné. I want you to lean on that wisdom now. And as a tradition on this show, we always invite our guests to share with our audience 3 timeless takeaways.
Number one, sales culture should be the number one thing that drives profitable growth in your business. Big topic, sales culture. Number two, building a sales playbook is not the answer. It is the start of you building a coaching culture, which is going to help you get a repeatable, scalable selling system. Number three, I want your salespeople to stop selling. Nobody on this call today enjoys being sold to, I think it's fair to say. So why would you assume that your prospects enjoy being sold to? Selling doesn't work. I want your salespeople to stop selling. And instead, I want you to help them, help your prospects to buy. And here's the secret sauce. I want you to stop selling, help your prospects to buy, even if it's not from you. Then you can demonstrate that you care more about the customer than you do the transaction. And then you will outsell your competitors.
Wow. Wow. Let me just rest on that for a moment. Truly an abundance mindset. You're now the successor to the wonderful Jack Daly. You've mentioned Jack a couple of times throughout this conversation. An incredible man, a force of nature. I suspect he has a lot lined up for you in the next 3, 5, 10 years. So what is next for you, Morné?
Well, as I mentioned, I now have relocated to the US, so I still have my office and my team in London that serves, a number of companies all around Europe. We replicated the business here in the US about 2 years ago, and I'm now permanently based here. And we're very blessed that the business is growing by leaps and bounds in the US. For me personally, as I'm partnering with Jack and slowly starting to take over his speaking business, I'm very active on the speaking circuit. I think the lady that books me for speaking got a little bit overexcited. I allegedly have 70 speaking engagements booked for 2024.
My
So
word. Wow.
the first thing I would say is please don't ask to book me for next year. I'm fully booked. But I am taking bookings for 2025.
Wow.
So the speaking circuit is a big part of how I get out there and really share my purpose and my mission with companies. And then I'm exceptionally blessed to have a great team of coaches and sales process architects who are working with companies from all over the world. And we love the idea of taking those kind of takeaways to these businesses, helping them with sales culture and repeatable systems and surprisingly teaching the salespeople how not to sell. So we're really leaning into that. Jack and I are talking about co-authoring a book next year. We already do a podcast every month, him and I. And from that, we've just gathered a bunch of information. So him and I are going to co-author a book. So there's a whole number of things kind of on the cards for me. And I'm having a lot of fun. And I'm one of those weirdos that wake up in the morning and go, I get to do this. I don't have to do this. So yeah. And I think that's important. I think actually enjoying the journey is incredibly important. If you're going to scale, you need to be pretty engaged. So I hope that everybody on this call gets, that you and I have had fun today, and it needs to be a fun journey.
Yeah, well, look, your energy and your passion for what you're doing is really palpable. It's tangible. I love your purpose in terms of bringing excellence to the profession and function of sales. It's It's wonderful work. It's so badly needed within the SME community in order to enable those wonderful SMEs who have a wonderful product or service to support them in scaling. So on that basis, Morné, I suspect there'll be a lot of people who will be very curious to find out more about you and your work, how best to connect with you.
Sure. Well, my marketing team reliably informs me that the new website will be up momentarily.
Okay,
We've
wow.
been very blessed that we've not needed much of an online presence to grow, but it's time. So they can go to emersesales.com. Emerse is Emerse. I think it's on the little bubble in the Zoom call, emersesales.com. The best way to reach me is we have an email address that goes to the team because I'm often on the road, so I can't answer my emails. And the email is takeaction@emersesales.com. Take action at EMERSE That'll go to the team. I'll be informed if you reference this podcast, then I'll know to give it some personal attention. Happy to have a discussion with anybody. And then we have a number of workshops that I run. So if you have salespeople or sales managers and you want to give them kind of a taste of what you and I have just done for the last 60 minutes, but in a 4-hour session, then if you go to my personal website, which is mornesmit.com, it's MORNESMIT.com, there's a workshop link. And I run workshops for salespeople every 5 to 6 weeks. It's a 4-hour masterclass. And for sales managers and sales leaders every 3 months or so. And I think we're going to publish all of the dates for 2024 within the next few weeks. So people can send their teams to me to get like a big old B12 shot in the arm. And then if they want to work with us more substantively, building playbooks, recruitment, coaching, mentoring, training, then reach out to us and take action at emersesales.com. And my team will be happy to talk to you and see whether we're a good fit for you. At the end of the day, what you won't get is me selling to you, right? It's got to be a good fit. It's got to make sense for us, make sense for you, but happy to have the conversation in the first instance to see whether we're the right fit for you if you want to scale your business.
That's brilliant. Look, we'll put the links that you've just mentioned in the show notes. Morné, I want to thank you for your time, your incredible energy. It's easy to see why you're a protege of Jack's, your passion and your wisdom today. I wish you every success with everything that you're doing. Take care.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.